Right, so welcome all to the leadership hustings for the 2025 Green Party election leadership. I'm going to say very little. I will actually ask questions. They've all been submitted in advance. I've removed duplicates and tried to prioritise them a bit. But before I start asking questions, I hope that each candidate was told they would have 5 minutes to say what they want.
On top, that's fine.
And as you're in the room, let's go with you first.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for having us here. I suppose the first thing and main thing I want to say is Yorkshire and Humber need some Green MPs. So let's go get some Greens elected. This is such a huge moment for our country, our party, and indeed for the region. We know that inequality is deeper in our country than it's ever been before. Poor people are getting poorer, and during COVID, millionaires have literally doubled. That's not right. We've got an NHS that's absolutely crumbling and really, really needs fixing, along with social care. Just 6 months ago, the Prime Minister and Wes Streeting said they were going to have a cross-party committee on social care. It's been 6 months. There hasn't been a single meeting. And of course, when we looked at international affairs, there's an ongoing genocide in Gaza. And what I think this speaks to is where the public are and where Westminster is. There's never been such a big rift. And so I think this moment for the Green Party is absolutely huge. And what we need is bold leadership. Now, when I say bold leadership, it's not just a slogan. I'll break it down. When I say bold, I mean for the party to be really clear about everything that we stand for, and just as clear about exactly what we stand against. When I say leadership, this bit's really important. It's a leadership election, so I'm obviously talking about my leadership, but actually I'm talking about your leadership too. I'm talking about every single person in this room, and indeed watching online, who can think about, what does next year's AGM look like? What does it look like if we don't expect people to always be in Green Party rooms, but we go out to their spaces? And when I say their spaces, I mean churches, mosques, synagogues, non-faith spaces. And when I say their spaces, I don't even really mean there, because that's them and us. What I want to see the party increasingly move to is just us, where we show the leadership in terms of community leadership, which is already being shown right across the region, where we are working within spaces to let more people know about the Green Party. Everyone knows we care about the environment. Everyone knows that there's a nature crisis. And the climate and nature crisis is not some distant threat. It's right here and it's right now, happening all around the world and right here on our doorstep. From the Labour government determined to bulldoze nature, to apparently solve a housing crisis, while they won't just build council housing, which is exactly what they need to do. We also need people to know that there's no environmental justice without racial, social, and economic justice. And not one person can do that. It requires all of us to show the leadership in communities. So that's bold leadership. And then I also talk about now. This is pretty obvious. I'm not talking about the next general election. I'm not even talking about next year's local council elections. I'm talking about right now, the urgency of this moment. There is so much that needs changing, and there is so much potential for our party to rise and be that voice that so many people are looking for. But we need to seize this moment. And I believe we'll seize this moment by electing a bold executive committee that Tom was just talking about. Those elections are really important too. 2 deputy leaders. The advantage of having a sole leader is that means we get 2 brand new voices elected. And so that means we have our 4 MPs in Parliament doing a brilliant job. But rather than it all being centred on Westminster and just those 4 voices, what we do is still have 4 voices with national platforms, but we add 3 people with national platforms too, myself and 2 deputy leaders. That seems to me like a really bold, exciting moment for the Green Party to continue to grow. So I am asking for your first preference vote in this leadership election. I'm looking forward to the hustings. Thanks for having me.
Ellie, you have 5 minutes as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tom. And thank you, everybody, for being here today. And I'm really sorry I couldn't be with you in the room in person. I had a full day of constituency.
Hang on a second. I'll start again. I'll see if I can get the volume louder. Try again.
Hello, how's the sound now?
Yeah, that's much better.
Is that good? Okay, brilliant. So thank you everybody for being here. I'm sorry I can't see you in the room, but it's great to be with you virtually. And I'm sorry I can't be with you in person. I had a full day of constituency events already booked, but I'm really glad to be part of this first specifically Green Party meeting, Hustings meeting. And I suppose the first thing that I want to say is thank you for everything that you do by being in the room today. You are clearly really committed Green Party activists, and everything that we have achieved as a party so far is thanks to you and people like you. You know, I'm always talking about how politics is a team game. It takes a huge number of people to win an election, not just the candidate up front, but all of the people working so hard behind. To win my election, which we're just celebrating, it's 1 year exactly since I was elected today, and to win my seat for the Greens, you know, there were 400 volunteers chipping in and people literally coming from all over the country. It's a huge team effort to win elections. And I suppose, you know, for me, it's really clear that the Green Party's had its most successful year ever in the past year under Adrian and Carla's leadership, and pay tribute to Zach's work in that as well, of course. You know, we have quadrupled our number of MPs, we've doubled our number of councillors, we've had really good results in the May elections as well. And that's because we have learned through actually decades of hard work. We've learned how to win elections. We've learned how to win voters over. And we've learned that when people vote Green and they get Green representatives, they love it. They elect Greens again and again because they know they get people who are absolutely dedicated to public service and to tackling the issues in their lives that could lead to frustration and disillusionment. But by offering a positive Green option, a Green alternative, people find that they've got a reason to have hope in politics again. And I think that's such a, you know, such a positive and constructive and actually unique thing that Greens offer people as part of the electoral process. So we've had huge success, but we're incredibly ambitious to have much, much more. And that's what Adrian and I want to do. We've both won multiple first past the post elections, both at local level and at national level. We know it's a huge team effort. That's what our, you know, our strapline, Together We Win, means. It's about bringing so many people together to win those elections. And to do that, we've got to appeal to a really broad range of people. And anybody who's ever been out knocking on doors knows exactly that. The key is learning how to share what we believe in, what motivates us, what we're passionate about, all the things that we want to change, all the things that are wrong in the world and that we want to transform, the things that drove me into politics 10 years ago after 25 years of activism. We know that we win votes by putting that in language that appeals to people from where they are, the issues that they're facing on the day-to-day. And that's what we've learned to do so successfully as the Green Party. I also feel that we have to lead the party from Westminster. That's why I'm standing with Adrian. We want to uplift as many voices as possible. And in order to do that, we need to be really strategic about how we make the most of the opportunities we now have. As a group of four, we're now getting far more media coverage than we used to. We want to build on that. We want to maximise use of that biggest political platform in the country in Westminster to get as much coverage and as much focus as possible, because we know that the Green Party could be in an absolutely pivotal position after the next general election. We're hugely ambitious to win many more Green MP seats in every region across the country, because we could easily be facing a hung parliament after the next general election. And we need our party to be led by people who understand what it means to lead in Parliament and can use that opportunity, translate what we're doing now, which is speaking out on genocide, on benefit cuts, on wealth tax, on all of these issues that we're so passionate about. We are doing that day in, day out on social care, exactly that. I've been banging that drum for 6 months. We need
30 seconds.
Pardon?
30 seconds.
Thank you. We've got this huge platform in Parliament. Let's maximise the use of it in order to grow the Green Party and to win more and more seats at local and national level across the country. Thank you.
Here are some questions that were prepared earlier. So the first one is from Stuart Arnold from Holland East Riding. And the question is very simple. Do you get the north? Ellie, you can go first.
I
2 minutes, please.
I would really I wouldn't have the arrogance to kind of claim that I really understand the needs of every particular area. What I would do is ask people who live there. So I would want you to tell me, what is it that you think I need to know as a representative about the North? In the same way that living in, you know, I live in the West, right? I wouldn't claim to understand the needs of the East or the needs of Wales or whatever, beyond that ability of human empathy and the ability to listen. What I do know is that we live in an incredibly unequal country. And one of those axes of inequality has, for so long, been the divide between North and South. One of the first places where I really became political or got involved in politics was I spent a week volunteering on a homelessness project in Leeds back when I was a teenager, a very practical project, and saw face to face from the people. I was literally renovating houses with people who were facing the most difficult circumstances of their lives. And I think the national inequality between North and South is central to understanding the inequalities that are present in all of our communities. I mean, HS2 is a project where we've seen that writ large in policy terms. Why not start that in the North rather than in the South? So I think my pitch is that I would be a leader who would listen to people in all of the regions about the specific issues that concern you. But fundamentally, so much of what
15
we're
seconds.
about is it joins us everywhere. The fights that we have, the challenges that we have are things that are present everywhere, rural, urban, north, south, all sorts of communities. Listening is at the core of it.
This one's easy. I'm from the north, born and raised in Manchester. And I do agree with Ellie, though, one person's experience is not everyone's experience. So I think even when you're from a place, you can't truly get it unless you spend time there and also make sure you listen to people. That's why I've been really proud as deputy leader for the last few years. I've visited every region in England several times and been on several tours of Wales. And that's the reason why I get out and about so much. And again, without sounding too much like I'm shoehorning this in, but it feels like the biggest difference between our two platforms, so it's the obvious place to go, is exactly why I think we need leadership outside of Westminster. Look, if you're a big party with loads and loads of MPs, then it makes sense that you can be an MP and you can be the leader. But actually, I take my guidance on this from Carla Denyer. When she stepped down from being an incredible co-leader, she said, I'm stepping down because I want to focus on being an excellent constituency MP. We have 4 MPs that I worked really hard with them to get them there. I'm really proud they're there, and I'm proud of the work they're doing. There is no complaints there. And I think to really grow the party to the potential that we need someone, i.e. me and 2 deputy leaders, who can be going around the country and visiting the regions all the time and growing that space. And the other thing I'd say, without sounding too shoehorned in, but I think it really links in, is this idea of national media platform. In the last 24 hours, I was on Channel 5 yesterday morning for about 2 hours on the Storm Huntley show. If you don't watch it, it's straight after Jeremy Vine. I also spoke to the Daily Telegraph, the Financial Times, the BBC, and the New Statesman. The Daily Mail ran a story on me, but I have to say I wasn't involved in that one. It just kind of appears like it does. But my point is I'm not struggling to get national platform. In fact, I would argue that I'm getting a bigger national platform than our 4 MPs. What I want to do is raise the 4 MPs too, because I want to see us all getting platform. And ideally, this is how it links to the question, regional inequality. We know things are far too focused on Westminster. And actually the way we deal with that is growing in the regions and making sure with local newspapers, local media and social media, we're building our platform that way in the way that many of our amazing councillors are already doing in this region.
So the next question, 2 minutes each, starting with Zach, is from Julia Brown from Holland East Riding, as the way again, I think. What does it mean to you to be a feminist?
Amazing question. I think the first thing I would start off with is to listen to feminists, because I'm a man who's answering this question. So I think it's about recognizing the deep inequality in our society that, yes, is around disability, is around race, is around class. And I think I'm not dodging the question, but class inequality is hugely important in this too. And the feminists that I listen to often talk about how class kind of even overrides everything else. And the question's about feminism, though. So I think it's about listening to how we can deal with the gender pay gap in this country, how to tackle misogyny in this country, violence against women and girls. And of course, the feminists like Carla Denyer, Sean Berry, who talk about trans inclusivity in their feminism too. So we're not leaving any women behind. I also think it's totally fine to be able to talk about these things and go on protests and talk about feminism, which is certainly something I do. But this is an example too where we need to see the policies in place that change things. And I think a lot of that is about making sure that there are women at the table who can co-design our policies. I think so often we see problems happen. I think this happened, the best example I saw of this was during COVID. I should say the worst example, the best example of the worst. Thank you, best bad example, but that's a mouthful. Where you had Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings in a room, that's already awful, deciding how to tackle things. And it turns out they brought cabinet ministers in, but at no point did they think, oh, we'll bring a woman to this table to decide things. And so when decisions were being made about shielding, about these bubbles, at no point did this come from the point of view of how this might affect families or single mothers. Now, of course, men can be in families too and are often single fathers too, but just the complete exclusion of the majority of people who are experiencing caring burdens or opportunities, thank you, depending on how you look at it, or being a single parent, to not have them in the conversation co-designing things when you're dealing with a pandemic and a disaster crisis is just one example. But I think it runs throughout politics, from the local to the national. And ultimately, I think about feminism is about making sure there are women who are having meaningful conversations and choices and decisions at the table. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. There's somebody famous once said, people call me a feminist whenever I express sentiments that differentiate me from a doormat, which I think is quite an accurate summary. Feminism is about recognizing the huge inequalities between women and men and doing everything that you can to tackle them. And that is an inequality that is still extraordinarily wide. I stood in Westminster Hall on Wednesday with a bunch of other women MPs celebrating 97 years of the equal franchise, of women having the vote on equal terms with men. And we still don't have anything like equal representation of women in politics. And I do just to reflect on something that that Zach mentioned previously, you know, drawing attention to the fact that Carla has stood down from being leader in order to focus on being an MP. That's a decision that is an individual decision for an individual. I don't think it should be used to argue that it's impossible to combine the two jobs, or that it's a bad idea to combine the two jobs, particularly when focused on highlighting the example of an individual. So I honestly think that's a little unfair to make that argument. The Green Party has a hugely proud history of amplifying the voices of women, amplifying the campaigns of women, both as individual candidates and the concerns of women as a whole, and also recognising that feminism is and must be intersectional. We have to recognise that there are multiple inequalities that intersect, and we have to tackle those together, as well as recognising that feminism is also about defending the rights of trans women too. There is so much to change in our society, and I'm really proud to be part of a party that has 75% women represented at Westminster, that has policies that ensure that we make sure that women are at the forefront of our political campaigns. And I'm reminded of a young man I met on a Green Party meeting a little while ago, who was incredibly articulate and great at making arguments. And I asked him about whether he was interested in standing for election. And he said, I'm paraphrasing slightly, I want to be an ally. I want to use my energy and my skills to amplify the voices of women, to put forward women, to tackle that huge inequality in our politics. And I thought that was an absolutely admirable admirable point to make, because feminism is a
15
fight for
seconds.
all of us, whatever our background, whatever our gender identity or sex.
I've been told off for giving you too much time on that one, but that's my fault, not yours.
Oh, right. I can't hear anything happening in the room at all. Just
Right, well, I can wave when you've got
through
50
info.
seconds in. Right, I've now got two linked questions, so I'm going to ask them both and give you 4 minutes to answer the pair. Ellie, you'll be first. So from Alan Mortimer from Richmond and Northallerton Party. As a leader, how do you plan to respond to the potential new Corbyn Party? And from Denise Craghill from York Green Party, how will you balance the need to relate to the anger many voters are feeling with the need to extend confidence in the Green Party to a broad range of voters? So, yeah, so we've got 4 minutes, Ellie.
My time starts now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Zara Sultana's announcement on, what was it, Thursday night was quite interesting, not least because it seemed absolutely clear that Jeremy Corbyn wasn't expecting it, and we still have no clarity about exactly what they are proposing. So that's not something that's necessarily going to give people a heck of a lot of confidence. I'm the sort of person that, central to my politics, and like I said, I got involved in politics 10 years ago after many years of activism, and I got involved in politics because I believe it is fundamental to change in the world for the better, and central to my politics is a belief in finding common ground and working together with anybody where you have common ground. And Parliament can be really frustrating because it's argy-bargy and very polarizing, but I have found for me, politics has been all about going out and reaching out and finding out that somebody you start chatting to on the doorstep and they start off like that, actually you have a conversation and you find that you've got all of these things in common, and at the end of it they say, yeah, I'll give the Greens a go, and they're often really positive about that because it gives them more faith in politics. And so my politics is all about tapping into that hope and that positivity, the complete opposite of polarization, because I think people are rightly feeling angry, frustrated, disillusioned, disengaged with politics. There's so much that has happened and is still happening to break trust. And one of the unique things that I think we offer as Greens is we build trust. We build trust by being totally true to our values and authentic. We build trust by not hiding what we believe under some veneer of pretense or anything like that. That's not how I won an election in an incredibly conservative area, and I won it by being myself, by going out and convincing people that actually, yes, they could put their trust in somebody different, even if they don't agree with me on absolutely every policy thing. So whatever's happening in the wider political arena, I think that staying kind of true to that central core of Green values, which is about social justice, absolutely married up with environmental justice, and a style of politics that isn't just about preaching to the choir or rabble rousing for a set group of people who, there are some people who'll be absolutely delighted that Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana are setting up a party. Great. There is a range of opinions within politics, and it's really positive to have people that have such strong values who are disillusioned with Labour, very understandably, that they want to be able to represent them and not be constrained by the Labour whipping system or whatever. But I think the Green Party has a hugely important role to play in politics, and it is about this ability to reach out much more widely, to appeal to a really wide range of voters. The Corbyn Sultana Party may be able to appeal to quite a narrow range of voters. In order to win in a first past the post elections across the whole country, we need to be able to share our passions, our values in language that connects with people from a wide range of backgrounds. We need that diversity within the party. We need that focus on doing the opposite of polarizing, channeling hope, channeling connection, channeling that understanding that, that classic Joe Cox saying, there's more that unites us than divides us. That's absolutely the politics that I completely steeped in and rooted in. And my experience is that is what wins elections. So I think the Green Party's got, a hugely bright future. Wherever there's common ground, let's cooperate, but let's stay absolutely rooted in our values. That looks like a signal to end.
No, 15 seconds.
Oh, I can't interpret it. I'll stop there. You could kind of do hand signals, couldn't you? 10 seconds or something.
Well, just so that you know, future questions, I'll give you a wave. I'll give you a wave at 15 seconds.
Okay.
And I'll ask you to stop shortly
Got
after.
it.
Or the time, okay? Right. Sorry, just trying to. Right. Okay.
So from talking to friends of mine who are left-wing Labour MPs, I knew that something was in the works, but I didn't actually ever believe that Zara Sultana was going to leave the Labour Party. So when I first saw that message, I'll be honest, my first reaction was, I'm so glad she's finally gone and done it. No more talk about, oh, maybe Labour will just get into the right place on winter fuel payments, or maybe they'll get into the right place on defending the NHS or on the genocide in Gaza. I was really pleased she finally took a principled position and said, no person who really believes in environmental, social, racial and economic justice has a home in the Green Party. Then I'll be completely honest, and I don't think I've said this out loud since it happened. My next thought was slight just annoyance. Why doesn't she just join the Green Party? Like, we exist. We are ready, we're building, we're having an internal election right now where I'm standing on a platform and saying, let's reduce our bills, let's lower our rents, let's fund our public services through a wealth tax, let's stop the genocide in Gaza, let's have bold leadership. Why not just join the Green Party? And then almost immediately I had a moment of reflection and thought, actually, I've just got to own it. And not just me, the entire party, that we have not yet convinced Zara Sultana, we have not yet convinced Jeremy Corbyn. And it's not about those two individuals, but it's about the millions of people that I think they will undoubtedly represent in this moment. And I think that's a call to us to go, let's be bolder, let's be better at this. Now, where I disagree is I don't think they're preaching to a narrow, small group. I think the media would like us to think they are. But I'd remind everyone that Jeremy Corbyn got over 3 million more votes than Keir Starmer in 2017. Now, I'm not suggesting we replicate that strategy because it was not a winning strategy, but I would argue that was because of a first past the post system and the Labour Party were actively trying to undermine him. What I think we should take away from it, though, is that those values and those principles of a compassionate politics, of a politics that is about community, that is funding our public services, that is protecting the marginalised groups and taking the fight and challenge to both the racist and fascist and reform, and frankly, the Labour government at this point, who are certainly flirting with them, if not pretty much in the same place, then I think that's a rallying call to us that that is our space. Now, I don't think we can just keep shouting at people that they just need to join the Green Party. I think we need to do self-reflection and go, what are we not communicating in our national communications or on the doorsteps that is speaking to these people that lets them know the Green Party is their home? Now, if this all sounds despairing, the really, really hopeful good news is I don't think a new party is coming. I think there's lots and lots of conversations, but I think there is still a window right now in this leadership election and shortly afterwards for us as a Green Party to get out there, to be seen in these movements, to be seen on the media and grow this base. And finally, where Ellie is absolutely right, is we win elections on the doorstep through that personal local touch. And we know that through Target to Win. We need to do so much more of that. We also know the way we've been doing it by hyper-focusing on individual seats is extraordinarily expensive and is not replicable if we want to be winning the amount of seats that we should be winning in the future. So if we want to go slow and steady and continue as we are, that's fine, but I don't think we're going to win enough MPs to change the country in the way that we need to. By being bolder in the national communications and connecting that with a local community approach, that means that before we even get on the doorstep, people know what the Green Party stand for, know about our bold policy, and then we add that personal touch. For me, that's the winning combination that is going to win us so many more seats, and I can't wait to get started. Thank you.
Right, so the next question, I think, is from one of your future challenges. It's from Ollie Watkins from Wakefield. It says, young people are the lifeblood of the party. We now have over 50 young Green councillors. How will you uplift young people and encourage the next generation of Green leadership? So
amazing. I'm going to caveat with 15 seconds, and hopefully you know me well enough to know I'm not dodging the question. There are incredible senior people in this party that I also recognise their contribution. And so I very often talk about young people, and it should never be this divide between the young people and the older people. And I just think it is always important to recognise the people, the shoulders we stand on in terms of where this party has come from. That being said, I really do believe that the future of a party, I mean, it's obvious, lies in the younger people who we are nurturing and growing now. I often say, if you want to see our policies or the Labour Party's policies at the next general election or in 2 general elections, look at our manifesto right now, because they'll eventually get in the right place, mainly, maybe. But if you want to see our policies at the next election, go to a Young Greens meeting and find out what they're talking about right now. Because I really believe the young people in this party are at the forefront, both of our strategy, of policies, and really get exactly where this party needs to be going. Now, what I can't stand, and I don't generally hear this from Green politicians, which is good, it's the other parties, is when people go, oh, I'm so inspired by young people. And I'm like, stop being inspired by them. Help them to be in elected positions. So just like the feminism question, you can be at the table and actually with that power to be making sure we're co-designing things, and ultimately you're also making the decisions. I think there's lots of work for the party to do around training, and this isn't just for young people. I'd also include people from ethnic minorities or working class backgrounds. That I think, again, if we focus too much on the senior leadership of the party, i.e. the MPs and the leaders, that's an important group of people for us to upskill and train. But the work I'm really interested in is, what does it look like at the local communities when people are getting training about how to do better social media, how to talk to the local press, how to deal with the media, how to get door knocking even better. We know how to door knock brilliantly, but I'm really interested in, Zoran Mamdani has been doing this in America, what does deep canvassing look like? And all I mean by that is, for those of you who have door knocked, thank you. Very often, and quite rightly, particularly near election day, the conversation is just transactional. Are you voting for us? Great, we'll knock on again. If you're not voting for us, we've got to get to the next doorstep. That serves a purpose, but I think where young people in particular can really play a role is in that community building, that community organising, particularly with other young people, about what are our deep values and what does the future of a country look like beyond just voting for a political party. Let's grow a movement, or continue to grow a movement. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for the question. And I absolutely agree that it's essential for everybody in the party to support the voices of young Greens. And your question, I think, was, what will I, or what am I practically doing? So there's, I think, 3 kind of specific things to talk about. I mean, first is that within my campaign, within my general election campaign, we specifically kind of nurtured the voices of young people within that campaign. So, for example, encouraging them to take the stage and take the forefront of when we were going and speaking to young people's audiences in local colleges, for example, and supporting people to get involved in work for the party too. Second thing is as candidates. So we've had a really specific outreach process in my area to recruit new candidates. That's something I was doing for years as a local councillor. And now one of the things that I'm running as an MP is this thing called New Voices, which is about encouraging people, in fact, not just party members, but saying to people of any background in the constituency, have you ever thought about politics? Has anyone ever said to you, why don't you consider politics? Come and we'll have a conversation. We'll talk about it, warts and all. I'll try and encourage you to step forward, because we need new voices in politics. Young people, definitely way more young people, but also all sorts of people from all sorts of backgrounds. So that's a very practical thing that I specifically do. And then the third thing, and I don't talk about this much, but you have asked practically. So just to say, I give away everything I earn above average wage, because I believe it's important to live like most people. And also because I can do really good stuff with that money instead. And one of the things that I do is I give to the party specifically to support the next generation.
The next question is from Marley Carlisle from Harrogate Nasborough. How will you advance your / the party's social media presence, Ellie?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think we do need to up our game on comms, and that's absolutely no criticism of people who are already involved. You know, so many people are working so hard, and of course we now have more funding because we've got more MPs, and so we have more content and more stuff that we're generating, which is really, really great. But we've absolutely got to recognise the importance of social media, and one thing that I would personally really love to do, and if elected as leader, this is something that I would really try to press for, and it requires funding, but also structure and focus. We've become really good at winning elections, partly because, in very significant part, because we've invested in the field team, in the people that we need locally to support campaigns, to support the activists locally. And that focus has tended to be on the day-to-day, the bread and butter of the ground campaign, right? The leafleting and the door knocking and so on and so forth. It strikes me that, at least not consistently across the country, we haven't got the same level of support for social media work across every region. And I would really love us to have a kind of comms field team, if you like. And it's not just social media, because in some areas, you know, people will read, I don't know, the parish council magazine, but not spend very much time on TikTok, right? So it's horses for courses. But I think that we really need to make sure that we're targeting our audience and reaching out to them very well. And it takes money as well. This is the key thing too. You know, we might say, well, why haven't we got as many followers as some parties that have got billionaires behind them? Well, part of the answer is that we do need to raise the money to invest in these things too.
So I do think part of the answer is billionaires, and I don't think we should ignore the fact that Reform have got GB News, a 24/7 propaganda channel pumping things out for them all the time. But I think our response to that has to be social media. Now, I accept social media is also problematic in terms of the algorithms, but I think we've got to work out how to beat those algorithms. And I think the first thing we need to do, as well as raising money, is just be more interesting. And I really mean it as simply as that. I think every time we're communicating something, we have to think about what is the storytelling aspect. Who is it that we're essentially challenging or saying is not doing what they need to do? And what is the solution? It is basic storytelling. One of the reasons why I think I'm particularly personally adept at being able to handle this, and I've been really proud to grow my media presence and also use that to platform other people, is because before, as a politician, I was a theatre actor. I get stories instinctively. And I think we always need to be thinking, what is the beginning, middle, and end of this story? And I think that is how we grow things. I also think through being bold, that's how we attract people to the party. And in fact, my social media team for this campaign is about between 15 and 20 volunteers who are brilliant at social media, who have come together on a WhatsApp group, some of them from outside the party, to go, how can we help you with your social media? People frequently say to me, you seem to be everywhere all the time. And that is true. I do a lot of traveling, but in terms of the social media, not one person can do that. You need to grow a team. Now, it is not acceptable for that to be a volunteer team if I was the leader of the party or when people are MPs. That's clearly when we need the money to be able to fund these people. But the point why I'm making about this is I think people want to do that work and get excited about that work if you have exciting stories to tell. So the final thing I'd say, and it's a theme of what I'm saying, is I think the work the MPs are doing is really important. I don't think it's always exciting, and that's not a criticism of the MPs. I would say that about almost any MP, including Nigel Farage, who has the biggest TikTok of any MP. You rarely see him talking about Parliament. What you see is him out in communities or out doing things. Now, he's out there doing fascism. I'm not suggesting we do that, but I am suggesting we get out there in communities and show the good work that we're doing. Less focus on Parliament, more focus on you guys and your future MPs. Sorry, just hit me next. Yeah. Yeah, she has.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Right. Okay. I'm confused. Blaming.
Well.
Yeah. Okay. The next question is from Janet McIntosh from Wakefield District Green Party. Is now the time to push for PR, given the Labour Party's finished under first past the post?
Absolutely. I mean, I could end the answer there. I suppose the caveat I'd give is, so I think I was one of the leading campaigners in the country on proportional representation in terms of very keyed in with Make Votes Matter. They made me a spokesperson about 5-6 years ago. And so I was doing a rally where I was going around the country talking to people about proportional representation. Of all the things that I care about in politics, it's one of the things that is the highest. And that's not because I think it's connected to the needs of everyday lives. I don't think it's the thing that people are desperately calling for. But I do believe that so much of what we need in this society is locked out by an unfair voting system. And getting proportional representation would unlock that so that everyone's vote counts and we could get a different diversity of views. I'm elected under proportional representation in the London Assembly. I understand the value of working with other parties. I also know there's lots of interesting facts, like under a PR system, carbon emissions on average go down 18%. Your country is much less likely to go to war. You're much more likely to have diverse representation in your parliament. So there's loads of good reasons for proportional representation. The reason why you might not have heard me speak about this in the last couple of years is because I feel like the Labour Party have weaponized proportional representation. They often say, oh, the Green Party are fine, but you can vote for them when you've got PR. So I realized once I became deputy leader, the main thing I needed to keep saying was we can and we do win under first past the post. So let's win more MPs. And then once we've got the MPs to hold the balance of power, then we'll push Labour into a wealth tax, climate action, and of course, proportional representation. I think that has to be on the table. But I also think the presupposition of your question is also right. We're in a different time now where the Labour government is so unpopular and they won with less than 33 or 33% of the vote. I think it probably is time for us to start talking even more about proportional representation. Even if Labour try and weaponize it, then let's go, fine. Are you going to change it then? Because I think it's really about building this cross-party coalition now, along with Make Votes Matter and lots of other organisations. In fact, today, Make Votes Matter asked me to promote a rally that young people are having to connect to their last question outside Parliament, because it's really important that everyone's vote counts.
Thanks. I never know how long a gap to leave for applause. So shout, Tom, when you want me to start my answer.
When you're ready.
Absolutely. Now is the time to push for PR. I mean, every time is the time to push for PR, and I've been campaigning for PR my entire life. It's one of the key things that I've been talking about in Parliament, actually, because I've covered 6 portfolios, but also constitutional reform. And I'm really involved in the all-party group for fair elections, which is pressing for proportional representation, getting dirty money out of politics, and stopping disinformation in politics. Those 3 things really, really important. We're pressing for a national commission. We've got an elections bill coming up, which is going to be a really good opportunity to speak about this. And I speak about this all the time. I mean, pretty much every TV interview or radio interview I do, I talk about this because people often ask questions about why is there so little trust in politics? Why are so few people's voices listened to? And this is absolutely key. We've got to have every person's voice and vote count equally. It's not a magic bullet to solve everything, but it will change the character of our political discourse in the country as a whole, and it will change the character of the debate within Parliament as well. So for both kind of those moral kind of reasons and for really instrumental practical reasons, it's a great idea. And we have a really key issue, particularly at the moment, because we have the most unequal Parliament ever. 2/3 of the MPs on 1/3 of the votes. That's what Labour have got. It's never been so disproportionate. At the same time, British Social Attitude Survey last week showed for the first time ever, there's a majority among supporters of every single political party who want PR. 60% of people in the country as a whole want PR. And we've got this situation where, if you believe the opinion polls currently, we've got the prospect that it could be not the Labour Party, but Reform that could potentially win a majority of the MPs on a minority of the vote at the next election, which is a desperately worrying prospect. So it's such an important time now to be banging the drum about PR absolutely all the time, to be out and proud about it, because by being out and proud about what you stand for, that is what shifts people's minds. And that's what I've done throughout my politics.
Okay, Stephen Addison from Leeds Green Party. Tourism reform will attack us on net zero and immigration. How will you convince people our policies are correct? Ellie?
By being out and proud about our policies. I mean, to continue a theme, you know, I got involved. It was actually Nigel Farage that drove me into politics. It's that simple. Back in 2015, I could not bear the way the country was going. I could not bear this polarization, this scapegoating, this absolutely disgusting politics that was in opposition to everything that I stood for. And I thought, right, I want more voices from people who believe the same things as me to be out there. Let me join this party, pay some subs, deliver a few leaflets, be a little bit part of the solution. And I just got more and more and more involved. And the thing that's kept me motivated and more enthused all of this time is that the way you counter that is through those conversations. I've had so many examples of conversations with people where actually I know that those conversations have changed their minds. They've told me it's shifted their opinion. It helped kind of protect against this kind of slew of sloganeering and money-fueled loudhailer politics that you get from reform, with this very simplistic slogans, this very simplistic scapegoating of particular things like net zero and migration. And actually, by being really clear, by saying, actually, what we need is safe and legal routes for people who are fleeing violence. That connects with the core values of the vast majority of the British population, who are really motivated by compassion. So we as Greens have this huge opportunity to connect with people. And we as Greens, we're also a really proudly evidence-based party. Okay, so when Reform is saying, oh, it's the net zero policies that are making the bills go through the roof, we say, well, actually, no, it's not. It's the Russian invasion of Ukraine that made the bills go through the roof. Actually, we agree that the electricity policy costs should come off electricity and be put on government expenditure generally. And by the way, we've got all of these other brilliant policies that would tackle the inequalities that are at the root of your frustration. So that politics of reaching out, of connecting with people, of not just dismissing everybody who currently is attracted to reform, but understanding why and showing how what we have to say meets their needs. Sorry, just wanted to finish the sentence.
So a couple of weeks ago, I was on Sky News with Toller, who used to work for Nigel Farage, and he was spouting off about net zero. And I said, and some of you may have seen this if you live online, where I said, Reform, 95% of their donations come from oil and gas companies. That's £2.3 million. And Gawain just kept saying it wasn't true. So I had to turn to the host and say, it's your job to fact check this. In fact, there should be a ticker anytime Reform is on the screen saying exactly who funds them, a bit like George Carlin said politicians should wear shirts like NASCAR drivers that says who sponsors them. And I think we should be really clear that Reform and their charlatans are multimillionaires who are defending the rights of billionaires while pretending to support the working class. And I think we should be really clear about that when we debate them. And in the same breath, it is absolutely crucial that we recognise an elected Reform MP is someone who is very different from someone who might have voted Reform or might be thinking about voting Reform. These are the groups of people who we really have to care about, who we have to reach out to. They have been abandoned by successive governments, and years of austerity that have destroyed their communities have created this inequality. And when they think about net zero and the cost of net zero, there is truth to it. Their bills are going up because the government are taking public money, shifting it to private capital, pretending that they're doing this to tackle the climate crisis, while it's essentially disaster capitalism because these companies are making more money. Now, not always, that's not every climate measure, and there's some excellent ones. But I think we need to get even more specific. So when we talk about tackling the climate crisis, we always have to talk about how this will lower people's bills, and the government must absolutely subsidize it. So the cheapest, greenest, most accessible option is always the one that we are essentially subsidizing. On immigration, it's almost exactly the same point. People will be annoyed with migrants when they can't get a house, when they can't get a GP appointment, when they can't access the NHS. These are not the problems of migrants. These are the problems of austerity and successive governments. And if we tax the wealthy, use that money to fund public services and tackle inequality, and then make positive cases for migration, we must and we can win that argument.
The next one's from, and maybe related to the last one, is from Richard Wilson from Bradford Green Party. Would you support the party campaigning more assertively for the UK to rejoin the EU?
Absolutely, and it is linked. I think no matter what you think about the European Union, and I happen to be very pro-European Union, Brexit has been an absolute disaster, both economically and also into the divisions that is created into our country. At the same time, I think when we campaign and say these sort of things, we have to be cognizant of the fact that lots of people in this country were not happy with the European Union. And also, I think increasingly in the last few years, I'm unhappy with the European Union. I think there is a lot of neoliberalism in the European Union, a lot of cronyism, and increasingly what was meant to be a peace project, I think is having worrying conversations and directions in the ways that they are going. we must not throw the baby out with the bathwater, though. And the European Union is a really important project, and we are ultimately much more influential being inside of it rather than outside of it. Now, some of this is just abstract at the moment, because I think if we turn to the European Union, I think we're like the difficult, awkward neighbours, and I don't think they necessarily want us back. So I think when we talk about this, it's recognising it's not going to happen tomorrow. But also, if it could happen tomorrow, I would argue it would probably be a bad idea, because we wouldn't be taking the public with us. And just as I was talking about co-design, I think what Caroline Lucas did shortly after Brexit was exactly what we need to do on a much wider scale. She went around the country, particularly to places in high Brexit voting areas, and went to listen, not to preach, not to tell them they were stupid or they were wrong, but just to hear why did they vote Brexit. And I think it aligns with a lot of why people are voting reform right now, is again, it's decades of feeling and knowing that the government has not had their back, that the government has defended corporate capital, private businesses, multimillionaires and billionaires. But once again, these were not the problems ever of the European Union. And ultimately, I think what we hope, and I hope to see, is more left-wing governments voted across Europe. And I think as that happens, we need to be increasingly building, whether they're socialist alliances and or green alliances, to ultimately look at what a better Europe is, because another Europe is possible. We've got to imagine it, and we've got to work for it, and we've got to take people with us. Like I'm looking for approval on the answer.
I'm trying to be a neutral chair. Ellie.
Thanks. Yes, I absolutely am really committed to campaigning passionately for us to rejoin the EU, and indeed, as our international affairs spokesperson, that's exactly what I was doing on the anniversary of Brexit just recently, with the statements that we were putting out and what I've been proud to represent in media interviews and face-to-face with people. And I've had some interesting experiences. I was door knocking in my constituency a little while ago, and knocked on the door of a gentleman maybe in his 30s, who was quite assertive, and he said, "So what's your view on Brexit?" And I kind of braced myself thinking, oh, he's going to be, you know, really cross that I'm not kind of pro-Brexit. And I said, well, I campaigned to stop Brexit. I served as a member of the European Parliament. I think that we would be far better off within the EU. And he said, I absolutely agree. I was, you know, I voted for Brexit and I completely regret it. You know, so many people recognise they were sold a pup by Farage, basically, and people are very frustrated with it. And it's one of the things that's contributed to the sense of disillusion and frustration. I remember another conversation with a man I met a few years ago who was actually standing for, it was either UKIP or the Brexit Party at the time. It's been through so many iterations, we lose track. And I said to him, what got you involved in politics? And he said, well, the bins weren't being collected and my local police station was shutting down in the early 2010s. And I was like, that's got nothing to do with Europe whatsoever. You know, that's austerity. So it's frustrating when very cynical politicians can blame genuine social problems like the erosion of local police services or local other public services and focus them on one bugbear, whether that's the European Union or immigration or net zero policies. There's a pattern here. But throughout, I found that the way to counter that is by explaining why I believe differently. Sorry, I can see the time.
The next question is from Michael Challoner from Thirsk and Morton. Should the party be limiting donations to £500? And I don't know whether that is referring only to the Green Party or to all parties. Ellie?
No, that's actually the first time I've even heard that floated as a possible proposal. And to win elections, we need to win funding, and we need to win funding from people chipping in at whatever level they can afford. Limiting donations to £500 would mean that all sorts of people, including people who are elected for the Greens, wouldn't be able to donate as much as they would like to. So I think that's not a runner. What we do have, I understand, is very, very clear directions and policies around the ethics of the money that we are willing to accept. And I know there have been cases where the party's been offered money and has turned it down because of concerns about the ethics of where it came from. And that's absolutely right and proper. So I think we need to be a party that is able to attract funding from people who've got more to give and are able to, as well as a party that brings in as many people as possible to chip in, because that's how we become as strong as possible as a party.
No, but I do think funding and political donations, I mean, this is not a contentious thing to say, is a whole murky area in politics. And I think we have a responsibility to be at the forefront of making sure we are doing everything possible to clean that up. I work a lot with Open Democracy, who are an organization who are looking at cleaning up politics. And in fact, we've been doing an investigation recently into some of Keir Starmer's freebies that he's been accepting. And there's a whole conversation about MPs or assembly members or indeed councillors, what can or can't you accept? And I'm just spitballing here. This would obviously need a working group to look at, but I think, people often send me books and say, could you review this book or would you mind posting about this book on social media? I think that's like in the line of okay. I would never accept a dinner like above in fact, I just don't accept dinners and alcohol. I don't drink alcohol, so that's a separate, easy to say. But I think that kind of thing is in the wrong area. And I think as a party, we need to be looking at how can we be at the best kind of forefront of practice with that. The second thing I would say, though, is yes, big major fundraising is important. But actually what I'm really interested in, and again, it's been demonstrated in New York with Zohran Mamdani, is what does those small donations look like when with bolder messaging, when you're running around the country, what does it look like if you're having many, many, many more small donors rather than requiring big donations where there's essentially, an argument there's a vested interest there. And I just want to link this in without sounding like I'm playing tennis with Ali too much. I was never suggesting that Carla as a woman was the reason why she stepped down, nor that Ellie is too busy as a woman. There was no kind of gender aspect to it. What I am saying, though, is when you're in Westminster and you've got a full-time job where you need to go vote, you don't have as much time to be running around the country doing fundraising, which is a really important part of this, is being in communities, doing a community talk where afterwards people then give regular donations to a party. It's a really important aspect of fundraising. Yes, to the major donors in Westminster, but also we really need that community aspect so people can be bought into the party, literally.
Can I just point out, Zach also obviously is an elected representative with a job that presumably takes up quite a lot of time.
It's not the same as having to be there to vote.
Right. Okay, the next question is from me, confirmation from York. Tell us one Green Party policy you don't support and why.
Okay, so the first thing is, obviously, Green Party policy is decided by members. We all, one member, one vote. On the day one of my election launch, I spoke to about, I think, 12 newspapers, national newspapers in one day. One of them was the Byline Times. He said to me, what policy do you want to change? I said, I don't want to change any policy. I want to leave the party. Members will change the policy. And he said, go on, if you could change anything, what would it be? And I go, I really wouldn't. That's up to the members. He said, what is out of date? So I'm going to refer to your question as what is out of date. I think our NATO policy is out of date. Donald Trump is threatening to annex Greenland. Anyone, even if you support NATO, has to then go, do we trigger Article 5 and go to a world war because Donald Trump wants to do this? Or do we now need to go, how do we make sure that we're building new alliances, diplomatic alliances with Europe, to come back to the European Union question, and the global south? Now, I was disappointed that I've heard both Ellie and Adrian kind of say on interviews that I've been shouting about trying to leave NATO immediately. That is absolutely not the nuance of what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the current policy is out of date and we can keep trying to defend it or saying, oh, we'll reform NATO within. I just think that's unrealistic at this point. Donald Trump and America provide over 60 to 70% of the military within that alliance. That's the same Donald Trump that wants to turn Gaza into luxury condos. I think we need to be really realistic about what building peace looks like and stop relying on the special relationship. NATO entirely requires that special relationship to work. So it's not the first thing I'm running at. It's not the thing I'm running to talk to the media about, but the straight question to what policy would I change? I think our NATO policy of reforming within is no longer defensible. And I think there is importance to updating that policy to reflect the global insecurity.
You need to signal when you're ready for me to talk, but I'm going to assume you're ready now. Yeah, thanks. Specifically, just to follow up on Zach's policy, Zach's contribution just then. The only time that I've talked about this in the media is when it's been thrown at me by other politicians or journalists as an example of why they can't take the Green Party seriously, which is a bit unfortunate. Actually, our NATO policy was updated last year to recognise the reality of the situation that we're currently in. Our international policy overall is actually really out of date, and I've been encouraging members to get involved in the process, which is member-led, of reviewing our policies. And so my answer to that question of what's the one policy you want to change, again, it's not a specific policy that I disagree with, but I think that we hamstring ourselves a little bit by some of our processes, our internal ways that we organise ourselves, our internal governance, our policy-making process, not always enabling us to respond and change and adapt as rapidly as we might like to. So I would be quite interested in doing that. And one thing that I'm really conscious of, as a party with tens of thousands of members, having a policy making process that requires participation in a conference which isn't accessible to everybody, even with online, the amount of time required to take part in policy making discussions and be available for votes and things. I don't think that really is in line with, you know, the aspirations that we have to be a fully inclusive party. And in the same way that I'm passionate about modernising the way Parliament works, I think there are ways that we could look to modernise the way we work as a party too.
Another personal question, this time from Dilys Clewer from Scarborough and Whitby Green Party. Why did you join the Green Party, and what motivates you to want to lead it?
Me? Well, I've kind of told the story already. You know, I joined because I was driven by a frustration with the direction that politics was going. I'd been political my whole life. So that was just before I turned 40 that I joined the Green Party. I'd been an activist since I was a teenager. You know, I'd been marching against apartheid in London as a teenager. I'd been arrested in my early 20s protesting against arms fairs in my local area. I'd been on umpteen demos. I'd written I don't know how many letters to my MP. I'd been an activist in many ways, and I'd worked in peace and environmental justice and social justice. I'd worked on fuel poverty in East London. I'd worked on peace in northern Uganda and Palestine. I'd worked for Friends of the Earth on road traffic reduction and the Warm Homes campaign. I'd spent my whole life working for social and environmental justice. And like I say, when I joined, it was just to be a contributor, to contribute in any way that I could. And actually, that's what's happened. I've just kept on contributing to the Green Party in any way that I could. And that involved standing as a council candidate, and then as a target candidate, and then serving as an MEP, and then as an MP. I never set out to kind of be an ambitious politician. I just set out to represent my values and to campaign for the political change that I want to see. And so that's why I want to help lead the party, because I feel that I have something to offer. I have energy, I have commitment, I have the values that I want to see play a bigger and bigger part in our political debate. And that's why I've decided to put my name forward to serve alongside Adrian. And I think we've got a fantastic model of co-leadership within the party that represents what we stand for. And this point we make about winning together, that's been my whole experience of the Green Party, and it's such a positive one.
I'm so proud of this party and everything we've achieved. We're the only party that in the last 8 local elections have made net gains at every single election. And so I think we've got these really solid foundations, but I think it's this moment where we need to respond to the moment that meets us. The climate crisis, racist riots on our streets last summer, the inequality is accelerating at a rate that I think, if we're honest with ourselves, we are not accelerating at at the moment. So in terms of what motivates me, it's partly when I think about Nigel Farage as Prime Minister, or even now, right now, it's when I think about the fact that Keir Starmer could be in place for longer. The deep destruction that happens within our streets when I spend all my time, or so much of my time, knocking on doors, being in community centres, when I hear people say that they've lost trust in politics, that they don't feel hope, that's when I feel motivated, because I've spent time with many of the people in this room who I know are the hope. And I think if people knew the work that you're doing as councillors, candidates, organisers, that's exactly where the hope is. And so the reason why I want to leave the party is because I don't just want the people who already know about the Green Party to vote for us. I want millions more people. I want everyone in this country to know we're not just a party that's about the environment and about the climate, as important as that is, but actually with a party that is there to challenge austerity, to challenge racism, to challenge fascism. In terms of why I joined the party, partly it was seeing Natalie Bennett in 2015 on the leadership debates. She was talking about the Syrian refugee crisis. I'm sure many of you will remember. We often hear about the refugee crisis now, but it's always in a negative way. Back in 2015, it was almost like no one was talking about it. And just to see Natalie Bennett on there talking about this really important issue, I think speaks to exactly what I was just talking about. Hearing a Green politician at the time going, oh, it's more than the environment. They care about some of the most marginalised people in society. And then during the Brexit referendum, campaigning alongside people like Caroline Lucas, again, hearing the difference Caroline was making, talking about the climate, but also its effects around Europe. And I just think, again, we need more and more people talking about these things and to grow the team. We need to really, really grow the Green Party team so we're bigger than any other party.
And the last question is from Khalid Mahmood from Leeds. Bradford, sorry. I won't say close because that would just cause a war. So Islamophobia is rising across the UK. What will you do as a leader to protect the rights and dignity of Muslim communities?
Really important question. In fact, I was having this conversation just before it started. So I do a lot of work in London in particular, where I'm elected with the Muslim Council of Britain. Also make sure that I'm regularly visiting mosques around the country to have conversations with the Muslim community. I don't want to center my Jewishness in this question because it's a question about Islamophobia. I also think, though, it's really important to recognize that having had that protected characteristic, I know what it's like to face discrimination. And I think the Jewish community and the Muslim community are at their best when we're working together, when we recognize anti-Semitism and Islamophobia are two sides of the same coin. And again, there's an amazing project in London where Tel Mama, the Muslim community, work alongside the Community Service Trust, a Jewish organization, to protect mosques and synagogues. And I think ultimately solidarity is the most important first answer here, because when they come for one of us, they come for all of us. And it's really important that we stand together. Secondly, internally within the party, I think we need to recognise that we are not nearly as diverse as we need to be. Now, sometimes people say to me, there's no diversity in the Green Party, and I always challenge that because I'm talking to you right now, Kelly. I know we've got Moffin in the room, we've got other people in the room, amazing people from global majorities and ethnic minorities who are doing amazing work. So when I hear people say there's no diversity in the party, that's literally erasing the contribution you're making. What I think is also true is traditionally the Green Movement and the Green Party have been far too white and far too middle class, and we have not reached out to communities and diverse communities. That is changing now, but it cannot be on your shoulders or my shoulders or diverse people's shoulders to carry all of that burden. Or opportunity, indeed. It's really up to every single person in this party, from the bottom, the grassroots, right through to the top, and we don't really have that hierarchy, to take individual responsibility that when someone comes to a local party meeting, we make sure this is a welcoming space for everyone, that we're answering questions and always making sure we're listening. Finally, in terms of policy, I think there's lots we need to be doing, obviously challenging this Labour government, both on the genocide in Gaza, but also working towards a more working definition of Islamophobia. I understand that lots of Muslim communities are really unhappy with the way that was done. And I think ultimately we always need to make sure, again, we'll come back to co-design, that the people most affected by any policy making are the people who are at the front of designing it or changing it.
Thanks. The very first thing that we all need to do to tackle Islamophobia is to call it out whenever and wherever we see it, and to listen to Muslim communities, Muslim voices about their experience. And for those of us who aren't Muslim, to raise those up and to amplify them. And I spoke earlier about the need to support more diverse candidates, and that is something that's absolutely central to my politics and to what I would want to contribute to as leader. I think there's a very specific way in which I try to use my platform to tackle Islamophobia currently as an MP. For example, I speak out on Gaza pretty much every week in the chamber. I challenge the government. I hold the minister to account. Just a week or two ago, I led a debate on risk assessment of genocide in Gaza. We're doing incredibly specific and focused and I think very important work. The Green Party is the party within Parliament that is speaking out so consistently on war crimes and genocide in Gaza, and supporting Muslim colleagues speaking alongside them as well to widen that range of voices. I think another example is where last year there were the Southport riots. And again, any of us in an elected position, so just briefly, I reached out to mosques in my constituency and to groups that were supporting refugees and asylum seekers in my constituency, and speaking out on our own channels to challenge the Islamophobia that was at the root of so much of that violence. So anyone involved in politics, all of us, but especially those of us in elected roles, have a huge responsibility to challenge it. Thank you.
I'm going to give you each 2 minutes to wrap up. I'm going to give Zach first because I believe starting first and finishing own advantage. So Eddie's going to finish, so you're going first again.
Thank you. I think you don't have to imagine what I'd be like as leader of the Green Party, because I've been deputy leader for a few years. Everything I've just been talking about, I'd like to think I've already been demonstrating. My commitment to traveling the country and amplifying other people's voices. Yes, this is about the leadership of the party. Yes, it's about the MPs. But I would argue just as importantly, if not more importantly, it's about your local parties, your campaigns, your future MPs. It's about performing on the media and accessing the media. Since I launched this leadership campaign, I've done over 50 national interviews on the media. The Green Party's never been getting so much attention. That's what I want to continue as leader, not just for attention's sake, but making sure we're using that platform to amplify what our MPs are doing, and again, amplify what you're doing on the ground. And the final thing I'd say, and the reason why I think this moment is so important, is because in many ways we are looking at co-leadership. The MPs will have a leader in Parliament. The movement can have a leader along with 2 deputy leaders. We will be working together. That, I believe, is the future model for this party, which is where we have a leadership team who are responsible for the members and MPs who are responsible to their constituents. I think this is a really excellent way to make sure we are being loud, we are being proud, and we are being effective. For me, bold leadership now is not just about my leadership or the MP's leadership. It's about every single person in this party knowing the potential that next year we have elections in lots of the areas that you're living in and that you've been campaigning in. Wales also has big elections and big elections in London. This is our moment. People are crying out to the Green Party to seize this moment. We cannot be slow and steady. We cannot be incremental. This is the moment for the Green Party to really step into its future potential. And so I'm asking for your first preference vote as leader of the Green Party. And thank you very much for having me, Yorkshire.
When you're ready.
You ready? Okay. You need to signal me. I don't think we're doing slow and steady. We are absolutely committed to transformational change. And to do that, we need to make the most of what we've got, of the wins we've had so far, of the lessons that we've learned about how to win together. I said that I got involved in politics because Nigel Farage drove me to it. But the beacon that inspired me to get involved was actually Caroline Lucas. I wanted there to be more people like her in politics. And I still listen to what she says. And she's really clear that she feels the leadership of the party needs to come from within our MPs. I think our co-leadership model shows what we are as a party. It shows that cooperative approach to leadership. And of course, under the incredibly successful co-leadership of Carla and Adrian for the past 4 years, we've had our most successful period ever. I want to continue in that vein with Adrian, and it'll be a step change because that's what the times demand. We have learned these lessons together as a party about how to win. We know that though we want to change the political system, the electoral system, we have to win under first past the post. Adrian and I have learned how to do that, and we do that by building the biggest possible, most diverse possible team. That's how we win elections, by bringing people together. And that's what we've learned how to do. Together we win. And so that's why we're asking you, why Adrian and I are asking members of the party to put your trust in us, to enable us to use the victories that we've had collectively as a party to serve the party even further, to win that transformational change in the Green Party's fortunes in the coming years.
Yeah, well, thank you both very much. I think we've finished the hustings now. Thank you both very much for your attendance, for Zach for coming, and you for finding the ability to make it to this. I think we've had some very interesting questions. I think we've had some very interesting answers. We've got a lot to think about. You can think about where you put your first preference vote, where you put your second, and whether you include Ron in either of those. And don't forget, there's the Deputy Leader, GPRC and Policy Development Committee elections as well. Thank you all very much for coming.